investigative reporter with Defending Education, defendinged.org. Kendall's with us now. Hey, Kendall, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Tell me how to pronounce your last name because I probably got it wrong.
It's Teets,
Teitz.
so close, but a lot of people say it the way you did.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my last name's Wildmon, and I can't tell you how many times I get Mr. Wildman. So I
People
totally,
get very creative with it.
yes, exactly. So I
Yes.
usually just give them the liberty. Kendall, welcome to the program. Once again, Kendall's an investigative reporter with Defending Education. And Kendall, there's been a huge pushback in recent years against diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, which on the surface might sound good. It sounds fuzzy, maybe sounds virtuous. But what's been uncovered in recent years, thanks to the work of you and others, is that DEI is very toxic. It has very Marxist, humanist roots. It actually divides people, it doesn't unify people. And a lot of parents have been waking up to this, and thankfully, a lot of educators and governors and other officials waking up to this reality. So, bring us up to speed on this whole DEI funding report that you guys have put out and where we are now.
Great. Yeah. So very true. What Defending Education has found in one of our numerous reports about DEI in higher ed that we've rolled out, given our expansion into higher education from K through 12, is that since 2021, over $373 million has been funneled into DEI programs. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion across 130 US colleges and universities. So these funds, they support DEI offices and identity-based scholarships, as well as other race-based programs, staff positions, training, and, DEI infrastructure. And these funds are often without public transparency or academic accountability. It's really unclear who is contributing to these funds, especially because they're often established through university foundations or so-called Day of Giving campaigns. So there's really kind of a lack of transparency regarding, donor identity and, fund allocation. So that's what we've found. And like I said, over 130 US colleges and universities across the country. And I think, this is especially salient given what we've seen out of, the Trump administration. There's been kind of a crackdown on this, and changing the name of these different scholarships, funds, whatever, doesn't at the end of the day change the merits or the core of what they might be trying to do.
Yeah, this is, I don't know whether I'm naive or I just had my head in the sand on this, but the level at which this had saturated and permeated America's higher ed, and even lower, K through 12, maybe not, maybe they didn't call it DEI, they called it something else, but just to see how rampant this was. And then you look at what Doge has uncovered, where the government was spending hundreds of millions of dollars in these DEI contracts, having these basically woke training sessions for executive agencies. It's just shocking to me. I mean, I just don't see this. DEI doesn't get me excited. Like, it doesn't get me like, yeah, we need DEI. But apparently this was rampant. I mean, the left had really latched onto this, and this had almost become like a religious tenet of being a Marxist. You have to do DEI. What do you think about, and this report, by the way, is very helpful, just looking at some of the top line numbers you guys have put out. This number of states where you discovered or uncovered this funding, according to your investigation, is in 44 states plus DC. And then this affects roughly 130 colleges. The number of funds, 281 funds. So that means some of these colleges and universities had multiple funds. What do you see? Here's my concern, and I want to get your opinion on this. My concern is a rebrand. My concern is that, yes, I think the Trump administration is genuinely ditching the DEI in large part. And I think his executive order actually mentions, like, hey, you guys can't rebrand this. I don't care what you call it. We're not doing DEI in principle. But my concern is that some of these states just rebrand it, right, and come up with some new fancy talking point that sounds great, and then we still have DEI. What are you thinking on that? Is that a viable concern, or do you think DEI is truly being ditched?
I mean, like I said, in some cases captured in our report, universities just use the same giving account number and would change kind of those DEI buzzwords that we've seen all over, to examples like belonging or inclusive excellence. And, it was clear that that does not, like I said, change kind of the meaning behind what these funds are supposed to do. And people can agree or disagree about the value of these programs. But in cases where they're using race or sex to include or exclude participants, that's a violation of federal law.
Yes.
And that is, what we've seen. Trump's cracking down on DEI because it's in response to these pervasive examples of, Title VI violations.
Yeah.
And so, I know you mentioned kind of at the, maybe states are rebranding, but really, we see this as a violation of federal law. Pretty much any time, you're discriminating on the basis of race, color, or national origin.
hmm Yeah, this is textbook DEI to its furthest degree is textbook segregation, and America fought a civil war long before even the whole Martin Luther King civil rights dispute, our battle fight. We had, of course, a whole civil war over the slavery issue, and then of course you have segregation and Jim Crow, and we can go through all the history. But I mean, America has a pretty in-depth history, a pretty expansive history, not in a positive sense, but over the issue of discriminating against people based on immutable characteristics. And you look at this and go, have we not learned anything? Like, we fought a whole civil war over discrimination based on immutable characteristics, and here we are developing funds so that we can discriminate against white people, basically, or males, right? Because masculinity is somehow a bad thing. And then we can, we can lift up, quote, the victim and the oppressed, and then demonize, the majority, if you will, or who's viewed as the aggressor. But to your point about rebranding, I like that you, in this report, once again, we're looking at this Defending Education report that was put out, and you, in this report, you actually look at some of the rebrands. And for example, right here at the top of the report is where the University of Nebraska-Lincoln actually did a rebrand, exactly what you're talking about. And instead of calling it, basically the DEI fund, they started calling it the Community and Belonging Support Fund, but it has the same fund ID number. So the money's going to the same place. And they think that we're not going to catch on to this, but everything's the same. They went in the website and changed out a few words and thought, well, we're just going to be fine now. But that definitely didn't trick me, and I'm sure it didn't trick you guys, Kendall.
Definitely not. And, like I've said, we really need to ensure transparency from these universities. They should be responsible for publicly disclosing detailed reports on DEI, how it's funded, allocated, what the expenditures are, identify donors and the specific purposes of their contributions. That was often murky a lot of times. And what we found, like I mentioned, there was a lack of transparency about where this money was coming from. In certain instances, you could look to university foundations, alumni, some private foundations, philanthropic organizations and whatnot that are, responsible for this funding, but there does need to be, some transparency and accountability on the part of, these higher education institutions.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And especially when you're looking at tax dollars. I mean, this is most of this, if not all of these universities that you are included in this report, are in some way subsidized by the government, whether it's state or federal. And not to mention the entire premise of DEI at its core, the ideology itself is against the Civil Rights Act, because you're discriminating against people based on the attributes that are described in the Civil Rights Act. And so it's illegal, but then what makes it even more egregious is that they're using taxpayer dollars to subsidize it. And I would be surprised, Kendall, that maybe there's a lot of donors out there that like DEI. I mean, I know we're a 50-50 country. There's a lot of Democrats out there. So, I think this has some support amongst the Marxists and the Democrats. But the level of support that I'm looking at, Kendall, it seems as though this is probably being underwritten in large part by multi-million and multi-billionaire donors that are far left Soros types. Is that a wrong conclusion? Is this grassroots, or do you think that this is being funded at the top by some major left-wing billionaires?
Yes, I mean, you've got groups like the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, which donated $4 million to Florida International University to establish a digital transformation program aimed at supporting food entrepreneurs of color. Uh, so that
Please tell
is
me you're making that up, Kendall. Please tell me you're making that
no,
up.
I can quote it here. To establish the digital transformation program at Startup FIU Food, an
Wow.
online platform to help people of color who are food entrepreneurs. Um, so, we have a whole list of these examples. You can go check them out in their report. I highly recommend it. There's comedic nuggets like that throughout. But like I said, definitely there are groups that are very influential and have lots of money that are behind this a lot of the time. And it's people with influence, like I said.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you have the whole Democrat Party apparatus is behind this. And what I want to end on is the ultimate goal when you look at, and this is a little bit above my pay grade, but I do read and I do listen to people who are experts on this, and that is the underlying roots of DEI is at its core Marxism. And the purpose, and this you can look at China and look at other countries that practice this, but the goal is to undermine American culture, to create like a victim class, this isn't a temporal, this is a permanent victim class based on immutable characteristics, and then you divide everybody. And there's the aggressors, and then there's the victims, and everybody's pitted against each other, and we've got to prop one up, and we've got to punish the other simply based on skin color or sex. And it ultimately brings down a culture. I mean, am I pretty much summarizing the end result if this DEI were to continue permeating our society?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, it definitely does have Marxist origins. We saw this with critical race theory. I mean, that was a buzzword 2020, 2021, which was ultimately kind of exposed for what it was. DEI came in kind of as, maybe a softer sounding alternative that was institutionalized across, education, healthcare, I mean, you name it, all of our industries in the business world. And it's really, really permeated kind of our society's ideology in recent years. But I do think that people are waking up and they're realizing kind of what this really means. I know you said at the outset that it's, might sound great on the surface, and that's, in theory, it maybe could have been, but once we see really how this ideology plays out, it's ultimately, dividing people by race, by sex, and nobody benefits from tribalism in that way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Hey, Kendall, thanks so much for coming on. Tell our folks your URL real quick.
For the
Defending
website
Ed.
or the report?
Yeah, Defending
Yes.
Ed.
Yeah, you can find our work at defendinged.com .org and /investigations, but more generally just defendinged.com.
Excellent. All right. Hey, thanks, Kendall. Appreciate you coming on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Defending Ed is the organization, defendinged.org. Check it out. We'll be back in a few.